Okay, so I hope you are all back. Let's continue to the child action method. There may be the situations where you may need to create only a part of the page. Okay, it may be it may look like similar to your Ajax part, but Ajax is a Ajax is a part of your processing the logic, and this is the part of holding the data on processing your logic. Okay, that was the process part. This is the data part. So, like Ajax, we define a part of a process, but not a process to be submitted or carry out, not the complete page. Similarly, here, if we want that part of a data to a page needs to be cached, but not the complete page output data. So we can go for having the child action method defined with the caching. Okay, let me tell you, the concept is very easy. The concept is nothing but an action method which is dealing with a partial view. Yeah, it's like fragment caching, but fragment caching is no. In fragment caching, actually, we have I can say it's related to the micro caching. That's in vary by param. Here it is purely based on the data part that we deal with a partial view. Okay, nothing else. We will see it. For this, you can use a donut hole caching. Donut hole means which is actually keeping the part of the page data, or I can say like it's a part. It's a data which is to be associated with a part of the page output on the opposite way. It's called donut hole caching. We can implement this by making the child action method. It acts as any other controller action, and its output can be cached as well also for the child action method. This is the way how we define it. Child action only. This attribute creates that caching for the output data, which will be rendered through a partial view. Okay, nothing else. So it is not to hold the complete page object. It is not to hold the complete page structure. It is only to hold the embeddable data part. That's it, which I can embed through a partial view to any main page. Of course, since I am holding only the data part, I am not holding the complete page object, complete response object. So I need to embed it to through a partial view only. Okay, to make the data as a representable ones. See, in ASP earlier, the same thing was asked in some other person also, like similar to fragment caching. See, fragment caching is the concept which we of course embed data, but it is relevant to caching the differential data. Okay, that is what the fragment caching is. Yes, you can say, of course, you can say in this way, like since we are embedding this data part in a view, so that part is similar to this here. But secondly, in fragment caching earlier, the ASP would be keeping a track of all these small, all these cache objects measured by its versioning. Okay, and this versioning was implicit there. Here we use this vary by param. That is how we create the micro caching. So yes, I can say like it is fragment caching actually is giving me the both objects, both the properties together implemented in earlier ASP. Now we have segregated or separated this. Yes, in fragment caching we were using the user controls, and here we are using the partial. Correct. Yes, 100%. What's the use of a child-only attribute? Child-only attribute will define the output of this action method as a donut hole cache. So this will result into the donut hole caching, means the child cache object you can think of, which is to be defined to embed through a partial view. Child action only is that attribute. We need to define this action, this output cache object as a donut hole cache object, and the action method as a child action method. Now how to embed this? Pass it on through view bag. If you are passing it on through view bag, then read it inside the partial view, the view bag dot categories, and normally as you used to display the value. So displaying value is exactly the same, like just pass it on through view bag object, or you can also directly pass it as the object within this partial view function parameter. Yes, I will give the demo. Once it is done, I will give the demo. And in the HTML action helper method also, through this helper method you can also call it HTML.action categories home controller categories action method, right? This is enhancing data caching. So we had till now discussed about the output caching. So let's see this output caching. This is one output caching example. A simple project. It's a small project. Okay. Created a small project as caching. Inside the controller, I had kept only one controller, created by my name only. Okay, and inside the view, we have this index. In index view, what I'm doing, I'm calling index 2, and in index 2, I'm displaying this. Also, I can also delete this part. I was just trying to pass it on. If I first let me run this so that you can get the output, and then we will see how to do it. Since I'm calling index, and index is can somebody tell me why this error is coming? No, I have not chosen any empty template. You can I have chosen always this internet home template, but I deleted those controllers which I did not require actually. Yes, home is the default controller. Since home is the default controller, and inside my mapping, I had not changed my controller, default controller mapping. So this error is coming. Yes, root.config, I needed to change. Correct. Can we define output caching anywhere in the controller? Yes, we can define output caching anywhere in the controller, but on top of the action method for which you want to cache. Okay, that definition is for the specific action method. Okay, so this is the partial view, and this is the value that we had cached for. Now click on the index 1. Index 1 has come. Okay. So inside controller, for index action method, we have defined one output cache. What to cache? Whatever this controller, this action method is generating the data. Now what data this action method is generating? It's generating datetime.now.toString, which we are keeping. We are also referring to this viewBag object, right? And then we are calling the view. So this datetime.now, this is the process data which is getting cached for 15 seconds. For 15 seconds. This is purely an internal process. You may not be seeing the difference at execution time on the first go. Okay. So when I'm coming from index to the second index, it's taking a fraction of second more than index 1, because index 1 is not getting any caching, but index refer to index 1 actually using this cache. That's why it is taking fraction of second more. In this screen, in your screen, you might not be realizing that, because anyway SLT transmission takes a few seconds more to reach to you. Can we able to see the cache data anywhere? No. You can only read it in a view. It's a purely internal object and we cannot see that. Like inside the browser scope, when it gets created inside the browser, only for that duration as a temporary object it's created. It's a virtual object, it's a temporary object. It's not a permanent, it's not a kind of a file that you can see. Okay, or it's not a physical object that you can see. Do you want to see the index view? This is the index view. Yes, I can change it, but Agra has already requested me to show this index view code. So inside index view code, you are given one action method. We are calling this action method index2, and we are reading viewBag.message. We have given this action link. Nothing else. This action link is actually to go back to the action, to the index action. In fact, why have index 1? inside the view we have to create two indexes. No, it's not like that. It's not like that. Uh, I had just created two indexes because I wanted to go back to another index, another view page, and come back to the previous view page, which was to use that cache object. Okay, this viewBag without message, whatever the message data is being read now by this viewBag property, it is now being read from the cache object. So, oh sorry. Thank you to remind me. For that, the complete screen is not very. So, when I'm calling this index, it is using the cache object to read the message, and then it is associated with the viewBag message property, and then it goes to it's forwarded to the view. When I'm moving to index 1 or index 2, then actually it is not reading that. And when I'm coming back to the previous page, again it is reading. Because in the previous page, again it's supposed to show that viewBag.message property value. So again it is reading from the cache object. But it will only be alive there till those 15 seconds. Index 1 and 2 is nothing but two view files, links. See, in action link, the first one is the text. Okay, I can write here, click here to visit index 1 or index page. Okay, and this is my action method. The index page. So if I click here, it's again calling that index page. I'm clicking here and the same index page is getting reloaded. Now if I change this from index to index 1, then we'll go to index 1. And in index 1 again I have given one hyperlink, action link. And this action link I am calling the index page. So this is index.html. Index 2. Partial view. This partial view is and this is index 1. Index 1 is given nothing, but just to index 2 also I have not did I use index 2? Let me see. Index 2 is a partial one. Partial one. Index 2 I have not used. in next to, let me see. It's a child action only, but inside child action we have written nothing. So in returning view, since we have defined no output cache and nothing, we have just written child action only. So it's calling its parent one. Parent one is the index. And in case of child action only, we can define this. We can write this output cache location, cut from here, right inside here, above child action, and for the view back message, I can cut from here, write it in child, and for the child view, let me add a partial view. Say I'm writing child view as a name. Underscore is a common convention to give. Here as a partial view. Okay. Here I'm writing H3. Play current C state time. Okay, and turn partial view. So I'm returning the partial view. I believe it will not take the duration. Child view does not support location because it is an internal process. Please remember this. It's an internal process. So child action for our child output cache object, it only supports duration but not the location. Location is implicitly decided by the server. So this part is returned by the child view, and see, it is embedded within index. It is automatically embedded within index. I did not call any partial using any partial function. We had one function now @html.partial, and then within bracket we used to give the name of the partial view. Do you remember that? But here we didn't use that in any view coding. I'm showing you the view code. So this is my index page, right? And in my index page, I have nowhere coded that @html.partial. Neither in the child view also. But what is happening here? In this index.html, in this output page, automatically the child action method is embedding the data, reading from the cache object. You see, it has embedded this data inside the index view page automatically. So this is the usage of child action method, which child action method executes first in the sequence, then the output is being cached, and then it returns back to its parent action method automatically. Okay, and then in whatever the output is generated by the parent action method, in that output this child output is get embedded and the result is displayed. Okay, output cache here is used to give the output only. Output cache is used to create that output cache object and to read that data from the output cache object and to embed it. So is the cache saved in the client by default? No. For the child action method, the cache object is an intermediate object which is further to embed within the view object. So in case of the child cache object, I cannot define the location. If we work with a standard cache object, then we can define which is an independent object. We can define that where to be created. But in case of the child cache object, we cannot define the location because it's an intermediate object which is further to, it's a very what should I say, random, transient to the transaction to get further utilized by the next transaction or the next process, not the transaction, transaction is the same, but by the next process of the same transaction to create to get utilized by the view. So here it is purely inside the transaction, and of course which is inside the server. But since it is purely inside the transaction, it cannot be serialized to any server object. I cannot write it the location. Functionally we can see now as internally it is happening, right sir? Yes. Only it is making the performance good reading from the cache. Yes, correct. But show me the index1.html. Okay, one by one I'll show all the pages. Repeat. Which part to repeat? Can you please mention that? Would like an example like authentication. If the user is logged in or not before displaying the page would be appropriate for the child action method. Yes. Why viewback.message is not showing the index.view? Because I have cut from there and pasted inside my child action method. Okay. See, index.view, now I have no code. I have cut from there, I pasted inside my view message. That's why. I'm a bit confused with child action method, so please explain it one more time. Okay. See, I'm explaining one more time what is child action method. In a standard controller, now let's also follow the code. You create a project first, okay, and then by default you have this index method or whatever. Say you have two action methods. One is index and another is, say, this index2. Okay, let me cut it from here so that I can just immediately follow it. Okay, so you have one index method and you have one index2 method. So two action methods are there. Now first of all, what I want, that whenever someone will call index action method, this index action method, before it runs, it should call, it will call the child action method. With an index action method, we have index.chhtml. In index.chhtml, we have called this index2 action method. Okay, so index2 action method will be called, but an index2 action method will execute. This is the statement will be executed, and the value of this statement, whatever the data is coming in our output, will be saved in an output cache, and it will return its own partial view. Partial view to whom? To the caller. Who is the caller? Index is the caller, because from index view we had called index2, so it will come back to index. Now when it comes back to index, now I am using what? A viewback.message. Display was rendered. Now what is this viewback.message will now carry? This viewback.message will now carry the child action method cache object. So child action method cache object is caching the partial view as well as the message. The complete object was cached. The complete partial view object was cached. That is going to be embedded inside index, and it is displayed. The child view. Running viewback.message. Okay, and this child view has been embedded. So this action method is embedding that child view. Child view is displayed, and this cache object is for the child view only, not for the parent. And that is the reason why this parent viewback.message is not getting read that child view cache object. So as a result, you can see this is the child child view page, which is of course using the viewback.message and reading from the cache object. And after that, in index, h2 index, right? This page was rendered at, this page was rendered at, but this viewback.message is not being read. Yeah, I'm going to give a lunch break right now only. Before the break, I need to complete this demo. That's what I was just taking some time. Alright, so what you need to do, you need to, because this is the parent and cannot access the child page. Yes, because this is the parent page and it cannot access the child page. Yes, that is a standard inheritance rule as well. The parent class cannot access the child property, but child can access the parent property, and since it is the child action method, it is to get embed its partial view, its own partial view to its caller, to its parent. Okay, you want to see the index2.html. Index2.html. Index2. Index2 I have not used. Index2. I have only worked in between index and this child view. See, the child view now I had actually created for index2. I created a new view now by right clicked onto index2. Okay, index1 you want to see. This is index. You want to see Amitav view page. Amitav view page. I don't have any Amitav view page here. I had created this underscore child view.html right now, which is a partial view page, and I have this indexes. Amitav is the controller name. Previous coding which you have deleted. Okay. I have deleted the previous coding. Sorry. Now we are working on only within these two index pages, two action methods. Index view is calling index2 action method. Index2 action method is defined with a cache object to create, and it is a child one. So it creates the object and it returns a partial view. The partial view which uses view bag and reads from the object. Okay, and then it comes back to the index view page. In index view page, we have the rest part to display, but index view page is trying to read the view bag from the same cache object. Now since view bag is in the same cache object, it cannot read. It is in the child, though the child page is embedded within this index page, but this cannot read. If a controller has multiple child control action methods, will all the child action methods be executed before the parent action executed? Depends on the call, how you call it. It actually is just an opposite, like the child action method will always be executed first and then it will get returned back to its caller, its parent. Okay, so it's 1:50 now. Today is too late for the lunch break. I can understand that. So let's take a lunch break now for half an hour, 30 minutes, not more than that. So it is 2:50. 10:20. So let's come back at 220. Okay, 230 maximum. Let's come back on 230 sharp, and we will start again on 230. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so hope you are all back from the lunch. So now let's continue to the next. This is about the data caching. So till now what we had done is the output caching. Whatever the response object was been generated, we were caching that response object, not the response object, sorry, whatever the process output was generated by the controller, we were caching that. If the controller was generating the data to be stored in a view bag object, or data, if controller generates a call to the view page embedded with the data, view bag object, then that was been cached within the object, output cache object. So here now what we are doing is the data, transactable data, of course transacted from the controller, we are going to cache on it. Okay. So most of the web pages contain some dynamic data when we talk about the web application. So if say for example a query is requested, query is sent to the database, and on a process the query returns the output, the result set, where this data is only gets to be transacted as of data of its own type being casted to the object and will be cached within the data cache object. So normally executing the database query each time, as we had already taken an example earlier in context of IRCTC, the many times I will place the request to query from the database object and to get the result set. The many times it will execute, it will connect to the database, it will execute it, and of course it will take some more time. That is the process. To optimize it, we have already discussed that we need to have a cache object to it, and here to hold the data part, not with any other object, maybe embedded with a view, or maybe embedded with a response object as well, or a view object as well, or a partial object as well, but here only to cache the data. We may use a simpler object, simpler than the output cache object, using the data cache object, data caching. This is the process that we inherit. There's an example given here where the DT customer is the customer model object, which is running a function called get customer, and this is actually creating one object called customer data, which is the data object which is going to get cached. and the caching lifetime here is given again a relative time, that is 1 hour, because we had used here system.datetime.now.add hours. So it will add it will define the lifespan of 1 hour from the creation of the creation time of this particular object customer data. Okay, add or get existing is one of the function which is used here, which is saying that if this customer data object is already present, then to append the data along with the existing data, or to create one if this named object is not there present. So for this we need to use this class memory cache. Okay, memory cache class is the class which actually gives us this data cache object. So memory cache dot default dot add or get existing is the method which we call. This is a predefined method which we call, which takes parameters. The first parameter is the name of the data cache object. The second is the function from where the output data is to get cached inside this customer data cache object, and the third parameter is the duration, the lifespan. Okay. Now this was the simple example of a memory cache which we need to write within the controller. Similarly, we have another caching technology which is called HTTP caching. In case of HTTP caching, sometimes, first of all, in one liner I can tell you that the complete page object can be cached here. Whatever the HTTP response object is getting prepared, that whole response object, if I need to cache, then I can go for HTTP caching. We can implement HTTP caching in the browser cache or at the proxy cache. Please doubly underline this line. Okay, this is a very important line here. HTTP cache is used to cache the output, the response object, in either the client location within the browser scope as of a browser cache object, or within the proxy server as a proxy cache object. Why is it so? Can anyone tell me why is it so? Any idea? Do you have? I can give you one hint. The hint is the default property of the response object managed by an application server. My question was, the first line here is written that you can implement HTTP caching in the browser cache or the proxy cache. Okay, not in your application server scope. I mean, not as a server cache. If proxy is of course not the application server scope. Cache the scripts. If the response object is embedded with the script also get cached. Why is it only in the browser scope or in the proxy scope? I'm getting answers. I mean, no matter if it is correct or not, your answer is correct or not, I'm just trying to get your intuition. To get data fast. Okay, caching is the process to get the process faster. So data, to get data fast, it is the overall requirement, because server gets recycled after some time automatically. No, if it is it so, then why other cache objects are there inside server scope? Why specifically not this HTTP cache object in the server scope? That is my question. Browser works in disconnected mode. Yeah, browser works in disconnected mode, that I understand. We need data on client. After all, after any process as a response object, you need to have it in the client. So then again my question will be, why then in the proxy? In Facebook profile, data stored in browser cache and shareable data stored in proxy object. Yes. So again, my question stays the same. Like, why HTTP caching is not facilitated in the server scope? Why is it only on browser scope and in proxy scope? Okay, I'm giving another hint. The hint number 2 is client side is always quick performance. No, not exactly for that reason. The hint number 2 is how the response object is handled by your application server. Based on that, actually the answer will come why HTTP caching or HTTP cache object is scoped only for browser scope or proxy scope, not in the server scope. Because the response can vary on various different requests. Anyway, caching is the process which is there. In caching, no need to go to the server. Then why about data caching? Why about your output caching? Why they are there in the server scope? So why we are being partial to HTTP caching? Okay, I really appreciate your effort, that you are really thinking a lot. I'm not depriving any one of you, but the comments that I was making now against each and everyone's answer is just to influence you to think more, nothing else. Don't take it in otherwise. Regular we download thing. Okay, downloading thing. Downloading is a very wide scope of answer, because we don't want to involve server anymore. You don't want to involve server anymore. Near to the actual answer. Why we don't want? Actually, here we have nothing to want. Here it is just an opposite. Like, if I say that server doesn't want to involve itself anymore, then the answer will be more near to it, because server used to response object to retrieve the data, so it's not response first time of the cache data. You are very near to it, near to the actual answer. HTTP will not complete round trip to server. Okay, will not do complete round trip. Actually, the round trip is completed. Round trip means the transaction is completed to save bandwidth. Of course, caching is basically meant for to save bandwidth. What's the question? I'll just join. Okay, the question was, in case of HTTP caching, we have got this first line. You can implement HTTP caching in browser cache and in proxy cache. Why not in server cache? What's there which prevents HTTP caching from server scope? Or why we can't have HTTP caching in server scope? Browser cache helps remove the need of repeatability. Don't think from the browser or from the proxy. Who prevents? Now I'm giving hint number 3. Who initiates caching? Who defines the restriction of these scopes for caching? Your application server? So think from the application server point of view. But I'll tell you the answer. I'm very much sure everybody will say, oh yes. It's a very simple answer. And I'm sure you all know this, because server does not support HTTP cache. Why the server doesn't support HTTP cache? That's my question. to save resources on the application server. That is, of course, no. Actually, server has no other option because of certain reason. I want to know what's that reason. Protocol is different. No. It's not about the protocol. It is about the nature of any application server. Server not read cache in the first response. Not exactly. Okay. So you want me to answer this right now, or you want to try more? Okay, so I got all these green votes polling. Okay. So the answer is, I'm giving the answer right now. Think the basic operational structure of request response being controlled or managed by a server, application server. I'm sure all of you must be knowing that the moment HTTP response object is created by a view object, it is now no longer in control of your program or your application server. I can say in an opposite way. An application server, the moment it receives a HTTP response object, it hands it over to its web server. And web server does not have this capability to handle or run any program for such object to further create. So a web server's job is for the request, it receives the request and it then and there hands it over. It identifies the target. Target means the port number, application port number, domain name, or application name, application ID, app ID, domain name and port number, and that request object is then and there handed over to the respective application server, application container, web container. And then your web container is containing your application programs and it handles your request logically. Similarly, whenever your application program generates the response object is automatically handed over to the server and there is no intermediate control that you can restrict it. And this response object is the moment handed over to the server web server reads the target URL, the target IP, that is your client address. Actually it moves through the ISP and the gateway. So it then and there transmits it through internet. So there is no intermediate state where you hold the response object within your application server scope. Any response object is kind of a bubble. When that bubble is created, it is automatically flown for the client. It is automatically now a transaction for the client. And this transaction is automatically initiated by your web server. So you don't have any control upon a response object once it is created. You don't have any control so that you can further make an other object and reveal the state in form of caching. So in your application server, you don't have any control, because here in HTTP caching, we are caching the complete response object. So the next stoppage is what? The proxy server or the client. So this HTTP caching prepares the HTTP cache object either in the proxy server to the next stoppage or to the client system, the ultimate stoppage. That's the reason. Can we say web server is a proxy server? No. Web server is not the proxy server. Web server may also have a second layer which act as a proxy server. Have you got my point? Let me explain this a little bit. This is a very basic transitional feature of any internet application. Okay. I need this whiteboard. Okay, this is your client machine. Okay. And this is your server scope, the server machine. Server in the sense web server. Your client machine. Now, inside web server, say I have published two applications. One is IRCTC, another is say mysite.com. So what it happens is it creates two logical memory areas. One is say for my site and one is say for IRCTC. Currently now we are say executing within my site. For every application, web server and web server is farther. So this is my web server, the bigger one, and within web server we have application server like IIS, so for instance, okay, my application server, and inside application server, so we have hosted two sites. It can be multiple sites. Okay, so this is my Gmail. For my site, there will be a specific memory scope. For IRCTC application, there will be an application scope. These application scopes are nothing but these are called web containers. Some you might have heard of in Java. It is actually the term related to the application server, web container. Okay. Now, what happens is when there is a request sent by the client, this request is first received by the web server. Web server hands it over to the application server. The moment application server receives any request, it generates two objects. One is the request object, another is the response object. So this is my response object and this is my request object. And this request object which is been sent by the client is being cloned to or is being transmitted. It is handed over to this request object which is bubbled up by your application server. Now this request object is taken inside your web container. Your web container is having your programs written, programs in the already loaded by the class loaders, and now it calls for any method to execute. Finally, it prepares the output object, the response object. Okay, so we can tell it as a view object. This view object as a response object, it is again forwarded to this response object which is created by the web container. Many a times you might have seen that due to some script error or due to some disintegrity in your view code, no output you are getting, but you are getting a blank page. How is it so? If the view object is not executed properly, then this response object, which is created by the web container, by the web container, it's now the blank HTML template, which is not updated by any content. This object is returned back to the client. Because with the moment the inside operation is over, the moment the called container controller operation is over, the action method is over, but it could not finalize the view object, the web container will understand that my process is over, and now its job is to return back this response object, the bubble response object which is created at time of receiving the request object, forwarded by the web server. So web container initiates the transmission back this response object to this client. But this response object, since my view object was not finalized, not updated with any content, that's why you get the blank page. Say for instance my process is been successfully done and my view object is also finalized. So my view object is written inside this response object by the object writer of my web container. Okay. Now this web container hands it over to application server hands it over to web server, and there is no control. For us there is no control. Okay. Now this response object is automatically shown back to the client. If we have any logical layer called proxy, either along with the web server, the host web server, or any another distinguished layer, distinguished system, or maybe with the clients, or maybe associated with any intermediate gateway which is defined with some proxy. So this response object, first destination or direct destination is this proxy instead of the client, and this proxy further forwards it to the client. So HTTP caching we cannot have here because we don't have any control. So we can have either in this proxy or in this proxy, or where there is no proxy. I mean, regardless of having proxy or not in the client, it can also be defined inside the client state. Okay, so this is the reason why HTTP caching I cannot have inside my server state, because HTTP caching it happens upon this response object, and response object, once it is generated, once my process, my controller's action method chain process is done, when my controller says that my action is completed and I now hand it over to view object, and this web container gives the green flag that my view object execution is over, then and there the returned value is written inside the response object, and response object is now out of my web. I don't have any control in. Right? So now have you understood why we have this limitation? Why HTTP caching object cannot be cached inside my web server other than proxy or client system? Okay, so I get positive response. Yes, you have understood. Green vote. Fine. Okay, so now let's move on. There's a question from Vadodara. What is the one-line difference between two techniques? Which two techniques? HTTP caching and other caching. HTTP caching is not supported by the server scope. It is only supported to proxy and the client scope, whereas other caching mechanism can support all of these three scopes. Data caching is again supported by the server scope. These are the differences between these caching mechanisms. Like if you go for what is it called? Output caching. It can be supported in 3 layers. All these 3 layers: server, proxy, client. In case of child caching, it is only inside the server because child caching is a part of a transaction which is happening inside server. So till now the client is not has not come into the picture. So there is no scope of client or proxy. Data caching, again, it is supported by the server method, the server action method. So it is inside the server. Although we can stream it to the client as well, but that is fundamentally supported by the server. Okay, you can see the parameters. The parameters itself is not defined with any destination, any location. So by default, we are doing the server side programming. So this is server. In case of HTTP caching, it is only in the client and the proxy because HTTP caching manages the response object, the final response object to get cached, and that is now out of the application server scope, which is traveling towards client. So the first stop can be in the proxy, or it can be finally in the client. So we can it supports these two. Okay. Storing data in the browser cache helps to remove the need to repeatedly download the content from the server. The same content, once it is the content is the complete response content. Once it is cached, then I can further read it from the cached content itself. So the server loop is minimized and my time is saved, my process is faster. Web browser frequently checks content for updates. Thank you so much. Okay, so Raja says yes, understood, sir. Finally, thank you. Web browser frequently checks for the content of the object. See, whenever there is a enablement of HTTP caching, this we have to write, of course, inside my view file, inside my view component. Then the browser is set to generate a continuous pinging to the server for any update of that cached object. If there is any update onto that cached object, then browser needs to replace it with that update. No? So that's the reason why it continuously pings to the server. Okay. Yes, I'm quickly finishing it off, and it will not take so much of time now. If content is updated in the server, web browser downloads the content from the server. Otherwise, the browser renders the content from the local cache only. So if there is an update, further it downloads it. Otherwise, it continues to give it from the local content itself. The functionality of the proxy cache is similar to the functionality of the browser cache. How browser acts like it continuously pings to the server for any update or any change. If there is any change or update, its server responds back then it further fetches from the server. The same thing happens inside of the proxy as well. So if it is cached to the proxy, then proxy also does the same job what the browser does. However, many users can access the cache in proxy server while only the users can access browser server at a time. The benefit of having this caching, HTTP caching in the proxy is there might be multiple clients be connected with the proxy. Say you are running an organization, you have an office, your office is having 100 systems, and your office is having one proxy server. If caching is done inside the proxy server, then all the 100 systems can take it from the proxy server. So proxy server only wants one point of contact which needs to get pinged and updated by the server. So all those 100 systems individually need not to connect it up. So that is only one of the advantage. Okay, but yes, if you don't have a proxy in your network configuration, then it will happen through the browser only. In the data caching, are we updating database from model? Is it possible to update model by database? See, updating model by database means, are you talking about the structure of the model? Or the data set? Data in the model. See, data in the model will get updated whenever there is a query given. If any request is sent to run a query through the model to the database, then only it will get updated, otherwise not. Preventing caching. Now see, again the same thing. If you don't want this HTTP cache to be not to be there, then you need to write http cacheability.nocache. This you need to write within your view page as a first statement. Okay, so can anyone answer this question? Which one of the following techniques allows you to cache a part of the web page? Correct. All of you are correct. Yes. It's the second option, donut hole cache. Great. Yeah, by default, HTTP caching is on. Okay, now we come to the next point. From here also we can improve the performance. We had already discussed this, so I'm just showing you this slide so that you can reveal the points. Bundling, it allows combining the multiple files like the supportive files or the linked class files that we have included in our project, so that when we deploy the project, it can be deployed along with, and when any supportive view file or a partial file or any unobtrusive JavaScript file needs to be patched with the view file, it can be done. So bundling allows us to combine multiple files into a bundle that can be downloaded as a single entity, reduces the number of requests between the client and server since it gets downloaded as a bundled one. When we use unobtrusive property, actually we also need to improve the bundling, implement the bundling. So bundling is by default implemented. Actually, it's a default property of MVC4. It's a default property now since 3.5 actually. So it improves it. The performance level, can be implemented in bundle config class in the abstract folder. So bundle config class in abstract is also giving you this abstract. We have bundle config class, and in bundle config class, if you see these are all the files which gets bundled along with the response view component. You see, these are all gets bundled, and all these files gets reverted back to the client when the client sends a request. So automatically what happens, it reduces the execution loop in between the client and the server. Okay. Just for an example, this we need not to code, as you have already seen that it is automatically created. All these codes automatically gets created. Whenever you include, whenever you write any include or any link or any using statement there in your project, and you deploy the project, all these files gets automatically included in your bundle package. Okay. When you render, it automatically gets included in your bundle class. And how we render? We render with the render function. Again, inside your view, these render functions, these statements are automatically written. This is just for our knowledge. Who actually implements those bundle classes or bundle files, say the script files or the CS class files or the themes maybe, or the site files, right? So these all files get rendered by this statement inside the view. Okay, these two statements we have already seen inside the view automatically gets generated. Minification we have also discussed. It reduces the size of the file by erasing those white spaces, the comments, because comments and white spaces are actually not required for the executor, for the program executor, right? This is for us, for the human being, for better readability. So minification is the process where all these unwanted, redundant things in my program is eliminated at time of deployment. Reduces the amount of the data that needs to get transferred. Now in bundling, we have already seen that all these associated files gets passed along with the view object, and all of these gets downloaded in your client system. So we need to go for a minification, otherwise the bandwidth will be choked. It will be delayed transmission. Thereby it reduces time required to get file transferred from the server to the client or to the browser. So these are some best practices for optimization. So bundling properties are important. The script codes, what actually gets embedded within your bundle class is important. How it just gets rendered inside the view object, that statement, how it's been syntaxed, how it has been written, that's important. Minification, the properties of minification is important. And here some best practices given. This from here also you may get 1 or 2 questions, short questions. Make fewer HTTP requests. It means you need to wisely judge where can we reduce the transaction loop in between the client and the server. Use content delivery network under abstract folder, bundle config is not showing, right? But bundle config is there. Build the application. Project configuration. There is no specific package resource only. Be created automatically. I don't know why you are not getting it. Comes by default. No, the bundle folder will be there and it will be automatically created. Yes, you can create. I mean, if you know these statements, or if you copy the statements from a project and just change the file names, then yes, you can do it. It will work, but it is automatically created. It is self-extracted, actually. It automatically comes here. You need to take, yes, it is an MVC4. Correct. We are doing MVC4 only. Okay. Use content delivery network. Content delivery network CDN, if you remember that the offshore storage for my unobtrusive scripts. So it will reduce the size of your project, and of course therefore the transfer data package. So whenever the user will request, then only that much of code, that particular script will be added to the view and will be transmitted to the client, but not all the standard classes or scripts. And also your project volume will also be reduced. And further one plus point is, many other applications can also share that. So you need not to be very specific or very even worried about that if that particular CDN file, CDN resource will be working or not, because that is already tested okay and is kept in the CDN. Make scripts and styles external, unobtrusive. Minify the JavaScript and CSS. This is a default property. Avoid redirects. More and more redirects you will do, it will take time even internally from one server application action method to any other action method. You can do it in many times. You need to do it in contrast, because you may need to implement certain layers for restriction, for security. So for that, yes, you may need to do it, but not always. So wisely you need to judge what to implement, what not to implement. Compressed HTTP response. Compression is nothing but encryption. This is the default property for the application server, IIS for example. There are settings in IIS where we may not implement the compression or encryption. This should not be done, because if we go for compression, then of course the response object volume is itself been compressed further. So that will help to easily access my bandwidth. So these are some points. Okay, now you know the answer, I believe. Removing unnecessary white spaces and comments is minification. Correct, minification. So this is it. We don't have any specific coding to do for bundling minification. This is an automated process. We need to just look at the codes which are auto-generated, how it looks like, how it has been structured, and how it is implemented. Okay, so it's a very small unit, very small topic for bundling minification. Now we are moving to the next topic, which is authentication authorization. Seems to be very tough, very complex, huge topic, but actually speaking it is just an opposite, for your information. Courtesy MVC4. Again, the magic wand tool that we are using here is annotation. You tell me, aren't you fascinated by the magic wand tool for validation along with models with annotation? Aren't you fascinated with that magic wand tool which we have used for caching and all those stuff? Isn't it easier to implement rather than the earlier version because of this annotation? Correct? Similarly, here also, you will now feel up without drinking 7-Up. Okay, but here we will drink what? We will drink the magic of annotation. Yes, so I can see, yes, very much. So your responses are very enthusiastic. Thank you. You might be thinking that, oh my God, for authorization, authentication, we need to create so lengthy programs, and we need to create classes to access those properties. We need to declare in whatnot in web.config file, then to read the context, and to extract the properties, then go for conditional checks and all the stuff, right? I'm telling you, it's very simple. Yes, one annotation to rule them all. Correct. Sanvit is saying very correctly. So it's all about annotation, like Java. I cannot forget Java because that is one of my lovable domain. Is also being evolved with the similar annotation nowadays. Those who have already studied Java 6 and above, they might have also experienced that. But it's the same similar thing that has been implemented here in MVC4. All the game of annotations. Okay. Yes, in Java Servlet also we use annotation. Correct. Correct. And in Java 7, in core Java also, you have class members to write, to manage the threads and manage the thread secure thread execution. We provide the annotations. So, I mean, in case of fork, join, framework and mechanism. So forget about that Java. I'm not talking about Java here. I'm talking about .NET. I'm just relating that. So here, implementing authentication authorization is also very interesting, and interestingly very easier to implement. in MVC4. Okay, and of course Apache, the RAD tool that we are using here, Visual Studio 2012, running on top of MVC framework. Framework implements the scaffolded classes for us. Only the thing is we need to include the annotations and to define some attributes to the annotation to execute it. Of course, if you want to make it global, those annotated properties global, then you need to write in the web.config file these annotated properties only, nothing else. Now let's start with this. So do you feel a bit relaxed with this authentication authorization part? Because I have seen most of the times whenever this chapter comes at the end of any web application development technology, it becomes very heavy in our mind. Oh my God, right? So now don't feel it. Fill it up lighter. What is authentication level authorization? I believe we know. In one liner, if I need to tell you, authentication is the identification of the request. Technically, I am speaking, okay. Normally, it is identification of a user, but in case of web application, it is the identification of the request source, and authorization is the definition of the access privileges. Authentication is the prerequisite for authorization. Yes, correct. So normally individuals to define with its property, we go for authentication. If the definition is found, then we say that yes, this entity is authenticated, and against that entity identification or against that entity definition, if we have some defined access specifiers, like what are the action methods may be called or can be called, are a part of authorization. Okay, you can make your students understand, like the student ID card bearing the photo, name, student ID, course, batch, etc. is actually the identification or the definition, property definition of the student, which actually defines that student, that entity. That is authentication. Authorization is, now once that entity has been authenticated as a student, as a valid student, registered student, then it comes for what are the premise locations the student can access. Student toilet, front office, the classroom, the recreation room, the machine room, SLT rooms, corridor. Of course, the student cannot access faculty room, cannot access accounts room where all the monies are kept and all those account ledgers are being kept, cannot access library stock room, correct? So these are the access restricted areas. Right? Of course, some other person, like whoever the visitor is carrying the visitor ID card, can access the front office, can access the public toilet, can access the corridor, but cannot access classroom, cannot access, can access the central room, of course, counselor's room, of course, but cannot access the faculty room, cannot access library room, cannot access MR room, cannot access SLT room. So these are different areas where we define the accessibility based on the authentication criteria. We can say .NET student can't attend a Java class. Yes, you can say. You can say. But it again depends on your choice. If you want to make the student to also sit through the Java class so that the student can understand the technology similarity or the integration, the concept integration in between these two technologies, then yes, why not? So it's completely depends on you. You are the administrator. So authentications are implemented in three ways here: form-based authentication, Windows-based authentication, and open authentication or OAuth. Right? Form-based authentication, Windows authentication, I believe you know. This is exactly same like the earlier version. There is no change. In earlier version, we had another authentication called passport authentication. Do you remember that? Yeah. So I'm about to tell this. Now there may be many people here. I don't know. Let me know how many of you do not have any idea about form authentication or form-based authentication or Windows-based authentication. Those who don't have the idea, overall ASP.NET, I want to click on the minus, red minus. Okay, I get 5% saying, 7% saying, no, we don't have idea. So I need to tell you. Okay, I'll tell you. In how many ways we can first identify a user? Okay, I'm talking about user point of view, because that will be easier for you to understand. Say I'm a Gmail user, right? First of all, I have visited the Gmail site, and I have created my Gmail ID. So when I give my details while visiting my Gmail site, I get a form saying username, password. I give my username and password. I click on login button. Then that username password gets verified by a controller action method. Of course, those ID password may be hard coded or maybe read from the database. Practically, it is read from the database, and it verifies that. And if it is returning true, then only I am being redirected to the inbox page. Otherwise, I am thrown back to that login page. What does it mean? It means my application is having one interface, one page, one form asking for login ID password from the user, and it is validating with the saved user credential. This is form-based authentication. All internet-based applications, internet templated applications, are by default form-based authentication. Do you remember on the first or the second day when we had those types of projects to get selected from the template, internet template, intranet template, empty template, right? And I told you the difference between internet template and intranet template. In internet template, by default, the authentication is form-based. So whenever you select that template and you create a project, you see in the authentication part, in the web.config file, by default it is written authentication mode equal to forms. If you choose intranet type, what is an intranet application? It is confined within an organization's network. Confined within an organization's network. In case of internet, yeah, like a LAN, for example, yes. So in case of internet, it is not confined within any defined network. It is open to all. Yes, like Encore Vista. Correct. It is open to all. So since there is no specific definition to the network being used, I need to take explicitly from each user, what is your authentication, what is your authentication, what is your authentication, right? But if I am using a designated network means which is under supervision of a static domain ID, under static domain. Okay, so I know that this is the domain, and this domain has closed network, correct? And this is the network which is identified by this, and of course my domain controller has been defining some privileges. So the complete management, the sharing, the privileges, the network security part, everything is being managed by the domain controller. So as a part of my application, if I deploy my application onto my domain server, in case of internet application, I will deploy it in my domain server only. So in my domain server, if I deploy it, I know that my domain controller is there who will be managing the user credentials, right? So whoever the user will be able to reach to me, means reach to the domain server, that particular mapped network folder where I have actually published my application, will be able to access it. So Windows authentication here will authenticate the user based on its Windows login credential. Based on its Windows login credential, it will not ask the separate login ID and password by using the form. This is the default setting I am talking about. We can override. Always you can have a form-based authentication to even an intranet application, but it is the default setting I am telling. Will Windows authentication work on different operating systems? Yes, why not? Sorry? No. This is of a Microsoft domain, and in that case you need to, if you are having multiple, okay, in that case, what's your question is, will it work even for different operating systems? If you have what is it called, heterogeneous LAN, okay, like of course your domain controller or domain server should be on Microsoft platform, having IIS and active your what is it called, active server configured. If you have subdomain controllers, and if any of the subdomain controller is been Active Directory, correct, is been having a Linux or a Unix operating system or IBM operating system, ultimately those servers are also being authenticated and mapped to the domain controller, the domain server, and your application is being hosted inside your domain server. Subdomain controller is like a child server. Okay, you can have a tree, no? A tree structure, hierarchical tree structure. So, there is a master domain controller. There is a superior server, the parent server, where there are some sub servers. Amongst sub servers, there are say 2 servers which are in Linux. But as of, if those servers are also to be a part of your domain, so those needs to be registered with your domain controller. That is your IIS server, which is there in the top level. So if any user is being logged in through that Linux server is taking the authorization in turn. It's a relay process actually. Okay, the client cannot directly connect up with the domain controller, which is the IIS domain controller. So the client is connected with the Linux server, it has to go relay to the IIS domain controller. So Linux will relay the authentication to IIS domain controller. Your application is basically fetching out this authentication not directly from the client. It is fetching out from your domain controller. Domain controller will be having the active list of those users who have been authenticated and logged in. Right? So your application reads from there. If any user is logged in to the application server but not privileged to use, or if any user is trying to directly connect up with your domain controller, will not be able to access your application because it cannot reach to your application. So if I am a user and I am connected to the domain controller, then by default I can also access the site, the application. Simple as that. That is Windows authentication. Okay. So for Windows authentication, I need not to write or categorize who will be the users been privileged to access what are the pages. I need not to categorize. Right. Whoever is online with the domain controller can access my site. Simple as that. But in case of the form-based authentication, I need to categorize. Because in case of form-based, individually for every user, I'm authenticating and authorizing. Well, I can also create groups, roles, and I can give the authorization to the roles. Role is nothing but a collection of group which is defined with some standard privileges. Right? So, if any user, instead of authorizing onto each user, I can also create groups and I can authorize based on the group, based on roles, right? Yeah, based on role we can provide it. Right? So these two are the things. Now the third type was the password authentication. The password authentication earlier was the authentication process which is based on the digital certificate and signature. That may be provided by your third-party authentication. OpenAuth or OAuth, OpenID or OAuth, Open Authentication, is a process which is similar to the passport authentication. So basically, forms means internet, Windows means intranet. Yes, by default, yes. But intranet can also be implemented by form based. Okay? But yes, by default, yes. That is the basic difference. In case of OpenAuth, a third party will do the authentication and only will revert to you back that if the authentication is a success or a failure. Many times you might have already experienced that some sites are there. Payment gateway takes up the authentication based on passport authentication, not OpenAuth. Passport is based on the digital signature and certificate. Payment gateway takes up the authentication based on the digital signature or certificate. Okay, so it is in MVC4, passport authentication, digitally signed authentication is a part of your form-based authentication or Windows-based authentication. So there is no specific difference into it. We did not have any categorization separately as a passport authentication here. It's completely a separate process which needs to get activated by some external site itself. Why it is not there now? See, if you remember earlier, like biometrics. Biometrics are to be stored in a third-party site, and your data has been sent to there, the basic authentication login data. They will automatically validate it. Biometric site authentication is much more complicated. you need to have some other devices. Like in banking sectors nowadays, you will find those biometric devices used by those bank clerks and even the managers also. Not the clerks, basically managers. And those have been authenticated by a third-party authentication provider, and they are now they will be able to access some part of their sites. That is a part of intranet. Again, I'm telling you. Okay. We need not to download any separate or additional software for OpenAuth. Okay. I'll tell you. Let me finish this. You will understand that what's happening here. In earlier days, what used to happen? Earlier days means I'm talking about say 6-7 years back. When you go for an external payment gateway, you need not to give any separate login ID password. Say you are accessing, I'm talking about again 6-7 years back. You are say in a site. That time we used to have Rediff online shopping, for example. So I have opened Rediff online shopping, and not even 6-7 years, 10 years back, say. Then I had logged in. I had added the things in my cart, and then I choose for the login, say Paynet. And since the Rediff online shopping is registered with Paynet used to directly have and Rediff used to get all the credit card details and all the stuff. Okay, the forms or your credit card or debit card details or your in the banking details are all been taken by the Rediff, and it used to forward to that payment gateway, either an external or the banking payment gateway, and it only had one button called confirm or submit. You click on it, it's done. But what happens nowadays? You have a separate login to the payment gateway, to the payment portal, like Paynet. If you talk about like internet banking, for internet banking sites, you have to give the separate transaction logins. So this passport authentication is now an obsolete feature. Okay, it is no longer been integrated part of your application. You have to have a form-based authentication there for your payment gateway, which is further supported to OTP, one-time password, all the stuff, right? So, and this digital signatures and certificates are nowadays taken not as to authenticate the user, because see, for the payment gateway, who is the user? Earlier days, the buyer has been said as the user, but actually speaking, for the payment gateway, that Snapdeal or the Rediff shopping is the user, because that Rediff shopping or the Snapdeal is actually forwarding the request to the payment gateway, right? So digital signatures and certificates have been taken for the secured transaction being initiated by whom, to identify that. So digital signature certificate has been taken as a site authentication, who is the initiator, the e-commerce site authentication, and for the user who is actually giving the ODI or ASI for that transaction, is taking the form-based authentication from the user. No, passport authentication was of course secured, but only passport authentication was not proven as secured. Okay, so that is the reason why we have now got the mixed mode authentication. Passport authentication for the site, form-based authentication for the users. Windows authentication mode we don't use unless it is very defined and very defined intranet application. We don't otherwise use Windows authentication. OpenAuth. What is OpenAuth? Many times you might have seen that you are asked to create a login for that specific site, or you may also have the option to log in by your Facebook account or Gmail account or Microsoft account, right? Or Twitter account. Correct? So even for, like, if you go for yes, Snapdeal, why don't you try Snapdeal? Why don't you try Make My Trip? These are the sites where they say that either you create your own login for that site, so site is given with the form-based authentication, or else you have another option. If you are already having existing login for Facebook or for Twitter or for Gmail or for Microsoft, okay, Microsoft actually is not so commonly used, then you can use that login to log into Snapdeal. So what Snapdeal will do, if you select on Facebook, it opens up another page asking for your Facebook login ID and password. You log in as a Facebook login. After doing that, you are reverted back to your Snapdeal page as a logged in user. But it does not log in you as into the Facebook. It does not take you to the Facebook. It only gives you that Facebook login page to let you log in, means let you authenticated, let you be authenticated by Facebook and reverting back your user ID only. Again a point. So instead of Snapdeal is authenticating you, Snapdeal is taking help of Facebook to authenticate you. Let Facebook say, are you been authenticated? Yes or no? If Facebook says yes, then Snapdeal will take you to the registered page or the restricted page. If Facebook says no, then Snapdeal will not take you to that. Are you getting a point? What is OpenAuth? So, if you want that user might be given with some flexibility, either to create a login onto your site or to use a separate provider who will be doing the same job on behalf of you and only to give you back, return you back the status of that login, true or false. Okay, and of course with the login ID. Okay, great. Now, from the business point of view, what is the benefit of both of the parties? The first benefit is, if you are taking advantage from Facebook, so you have to register to the Facebook. You means the application provider. So I'm Snapdeal, owner of the Snapdeal. So I, as a Snapdeal, get to register first to the Facebook. So there is a business transaction. Facebook will give me some piece of code. That piece of code, that web service file, I need to include to my project. Of course, as of our example, we need not to do so because there is an option called Google. Google is giving you the free stuff, Gmail login, free Gmail login. You need not to pay anything. You need not to download any script. Okay. Your site, if it is online with internet, of course it will be online with internet. It will connect up with Google. It will randomly giving you that page to log in with a Gmail, and you will be reverted back. If your login is successful, you will be reverted back to the restricted page. This what you can give the demonstration to your students as well. Okay, using the Gmail, and we will do that only. But for Twitter, for Facebook, for Microsoft, also we can go for Microsoft. These are paid services. Okay. Now, what is the benefit of Google then? The benefit of Google is a huge repository of the all crawlers, right? So the moment somebody connects you up, like you are the snapdeal.com, and you send a request to Google for connecting up with for authentication, Google extracts many information for its search engine from your this transaction. So that's the benefit of Google. Freely Google is getting so much of crawlers to distribute. Okay. So this is what open authentication is all about. Formless authentication, I've already told you. It looks like this. It gives you this interface. Okay. And as of the code part, it automatically creates under views, under account. It creates this login page for you. It creates this register page for you. Okay, all these pages are automatically created for you under account. Of course, for this you need to select internet type application, internet template, and all these files, all these codes are automatically created for you. You need not to create anything. Okay, you need not to create anything. Let me show you. If I create a new project, Asp Net Mvc, say auth prj. Okay, internet type razor. Okay, my system is taking time because my C drive is hardly having any space. Keep 13% free. I'm almost to the 13%. So this is the project automatically created for you. Inside your controller, you'll see there is an account controller created for you automatically. Okay. Account model is all coded with these codes. Right, allow, anonymous, authorize. We'll see this one by one. What are these annotations all about? You have the model also, account model. This account model is also created with DB context, user profiles. You see, REST external login model, login password model. Everything is there. Register model, external login. And if we go to the view under account, you see all these views are also created: register, manage, login, external login failure, login confirmation, set password partial, remove external login partial, change password partial, everything. Now if you go to web.config file, you'll see in this web.config file, this is the default connection, and this is the initial catalog. By the way, initial catalog is not created so far right now. Auth project 2014-04-28. Today is 28. 15:58:58 is the time. This is the timestamp which is by default used for this name to generate the table database. So till now we don't have that database, and my SQL server here it is /projects. So I need to make a change here. Of v11.0 I need to write here projects. Is it projects? Projects. Okay. PROJECTS projects. Okay. The moment I'll run it and I'll call that authentication. See, unless and until the controller is called, that database will not be created. That though I had already told you, no? Code first approach. This is a code first approach. Now, the moment I'll click on register, the database will be created. Now, right now, I don't have any user created here because I don't have the database itself. So, I click on register. I got the registration form, right? And I give the username as say my name only. Password I'm giving my surname, MAJUMDER. Password MAJUMDER. Register. If I click on register, it will get registered. How? See, it is registered. Hello, it is showing my name. You want to see why it is got registered? I stop this. I go to this. I refresh. Now you see auth proj, auth prj. 2014-0428-1558-58. If I expand this inside tables, you see user profile, membership, all tables are created based on the model. If you right click onto user profile and view data, see this username has entered here. Profiles, the create date is this, user ID is 1, create date is this, is confirmed true. This is what password failures since last success. So I have no failure. This is the password encrypted automatically. I gave my password as my surname. It's 8-character length, but you see this is the MD5 authentication, MD5 algorithm used to encrypt the password. How it came? See, ASP.NET Auth how it came? It came automatically when you run the project and you called that controller. When I clicked on that register link, register link is under the controller. Register link is under account controller. See, in account controller we have action method login. We have action method register also. Where is that? Login, log off, register. So when I have called for this controller was scaffolded from that model, and this controller is having, what is that? Model scaffolded from where it is using this default connection context. So when it is constructing this model object, it's creating the database. Acha, this is not model first approach, because do you see any EDMX file here? We don't have any EDMX file now. So it's a code first approach. In code first approach we have that data context. Data context we are anyway using here. Okay, yeah, I'll give 5 minutes break again, but let me finish it up, this particular demonstration. Okay, so everything is created and your SQL Server object is also created, and the SQL Server objects are also included with that data. Connection string and everything is as usual written inside web.config file. See, this is default connection which we are calling in model class, and this is the connection string. Inside connection string by default it is v11.0, but in my system when I installed it was termed as projects, so I had to change this v11.0 to projects. Rest I didn't change. Initial catalog, auth proj, by this name only the database is created. Everything which was there automatically written, I just kept the same. I did not change anything other than this data source local db / projects. For your case, you might need not to change this even. Okay. For add new field, what you need to do is to create the model and then again scaffold the controller and view. You have to create more code first approach or model first approach. This is just for the default demonstration. WordPress Joomla also creates such auto-generated codes. Yes. Using session, your name is there like hi username. Correct. Correct. This is read from the session cookie. Can it be viewed in app data as well? In app data, I mean to say here? No, we are not storing here in app data. Refresh once. We are not storing in app data. Our session will continue till 5 o'clock. Okay. So giving you 5 minutes bio break, as many of you have requested me. Quickly we will come back.